Welcome to Screen Quest, a podcast where a fellowship of film lovers and armchair movie experts plays film roulette. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Waterman, joined as always by Will Rotondi.
Hey, good afternoon.
And May Finch.
Hey, everyone.
On today's episode, Take 4, we are going to be covering All About Eve and Mean Girls. It's our first versus mode card. If you did not tune into last week's episode, we drew a card where we're going to be comparing and contrasting these two films and declaring a definitive winner by our own individual criteria. So there's three of us, which means there can't be a tie. I think that's how math works. So I'll be very curious to see where we come down on this. But first, we are going to wish another special birthday to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which released on April 2nd in 1968. Do I have that right? Will, fact check me.
I will gladly do that. I feel like you're correct, but let me double check.
I'm doing that off of memory because I did look at it earlier this
68.
week. Nailed it. Excellent. One of my favorite Kubrick movies, but one that I'll admit is a bit of a slog, like if you're not in the right headspace, and certainly took me a couple of tries to I had some false starts in this one. Look, it's very soothing. There's lots of classical music and beautiful imagery. It's a great movie to watch if you are very awake and feeling cerebral. Not a great movie to watch if you're feeling a bit sleepy or sick, which is the first two times that I tried to watch it and stalled out. Have both of you seen this?
Absolutely. But I also watched it when I was a kid the first time. And so for me, it was the pacing that really threw me off, where I got tired of it really quickly. But when I watched it later, as probably in middle school, I definitely had more of an appreciation for it.
I have not seen it, but I do have a somewhat embarrassing story related to it.
Oh, please do.
Yes, do tell.
I love it, especially in light of this episode and the movies we're going to talk about. Give me the embarrassing story, please.
Oh, God. Okay, so in college, I went on a first date with a guy, and we had both previously shared our favorite movies, and his was 2001: A Space Odyssey, and mine was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And he just really insisted that we should watch one of our favorite movies on this first date, despite neither of those being a good first date movie.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh,
and we flipped a coin, and Eternal Sunshine won, and we did not go on a second date.
Yeah, I don't know if that's because of that movie in particular, but yeah, I can tell you right now, to be honest, if I had suggested especially in my early 20s that we watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, that's the equivalent of Netflix and chill. I got other stuff on my mind, probably. Let's be real. So not to say that's what happened in your case, but I would not have suggested that as with the intention of probably either of us paying attention. I'll just leave it there. I do love this movie. In fact, little nerd talk, they just put an emote into Destiny that I paid real world money for, because it was the ape bashing the pile of bones and throwing the bone into the sky. I was like, well, there's a Kubrick emote in one of my favorite video games.
Awesome.
It is great. Yeah, I think there's the special effects hold up really well. I think that Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite sequence is something that it's 20 minutes. I still watch from time to time because it's just mind blowing to me how ahead of its time it is. It's almost 10 years before Star Wars, and I think it not only hangs with Star Wars in terms of how impressive the special effects are, but I think in some ways it surpasses sort of what a space warp movie could be. So
Agreed.
Are we fans of Hal? Well, I should ask Will. Are you a fan of Hal? I thought that character is one of the saving graces for me the first time I watched the movie. I loved how sinister and unsettling that robot character is.
He is. Well, and he's also so conflicted. It was before we had sort of the android questions of films like Alien or Aliens, that Hal was sort of the first robot that humans were not exactly too sure about what his intentions were, but it was because of confliction of what he thought his directive was. So he was just doing what he thought he was programmed to do. And you know, it's kind of like, okay, well, sorry you were on the short end of that stick, but this is the way he's going. So he is kind of master of the ship. So, but I don't know. I think that it definitely holds up today in terms of the cinematography is gorgeous. Like you were saying, the special effects for the age were amazing and they still hold up. Because you look at some of the scenes, like when they're going up to the space station at the beginning of the film, or even just some of the realism, because there's so much, like Star Wars, for instance, was always like the shooty bang bang in space, you hear everything. But in 2001, it tried to be more realistic where you don't really hear anything, especially when I want to say Bowman is the other one. Is it Bowman or Poole who goes outside and is doing work on the array? I can't remember which guy it is, but you know, all you hear is their breathing for like 15 minutes while he's just kind of, you know, slowly floating along to go out and do some work outside the ship. So I think in terms of pacing, that again, when I was a kid and I watched that, I thought, God, this is so long. But going back and watching it now, it's very atmospheric, it's very gentle, and I think in that respect is actually more realistic and beautiful because of that. But again, you have to be in the right mindset. You can't just go in and expect like an action movie, for instance, because that is so far from it. But yeah.
Reading the novel too is a recommendation I often give to people. Like if they like the film, I'm like, if you are swept up in kind of the majesty of the film, like, because it's a feast for the eyes and the ears, really. The novel gives great sort of context to a lot of things, and it's a very short read. I think it's a couple hundred pages, and it was written I think like after like the film was like well into production. So like I think it started off as a screenplay, and then he wanted to write like the novel to kind of have a separate way of like telling that story, and then had, you know, intentions to write sequel books, which he did. I think there was 3 sequels to it. So
yeah, what was it, 2010 and like 2068? And I think he did like 3001, Arthur C. Clarke.
you're correct on all fronts.
So yeah,
it's always that third one that I'm like, it's 20 like 60 or 70 something. Like it's a weird, like, you know, non like easy to remember like kind of number. So but yeah,
I may forget about Carl Sagan, but Arthur C. Clarke, I will hold it down for. But but yeah, no, and actually you talked about that it was being written during the production. And I would actually say that it's better to watch the film before you read the book.
Yes.
It's like one of those rare cases where I would recommend movie first and then book, because so much of the film is interpretation, especially at the very end. And I think that going in knowing what, at least from Arthur C. Clarke's perspective of what that was supposed to be versus maybe leaving it more open-ended like we have in the film, I would definitely recommend visually, you know, going through that journey than reading it first.
I 100% concur. I think it's like get the context after, like have kind of a, you know, a blank palette, and like afterwards, like, you know, after you've drawn your conclusions, see like how that jives with like what the author's like intent was, because I think it is very exposition-y. If I remember, it's been I haven't, it's been since high school, but like the book, like I felt like really much didn't leave a lot like up to interpretation. It was sort of like, this is what's going on.
Yep.
Which is kind of disappointing. Like after, you know, like I think the film just tackles it beautifully. My favorite little conspiracy theory before we move on is that I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan. He wanted Pink Floyd to do the score originally to this, like because Kubrick loved their music, and a lot of people think the song Echoes, which originally had space themed lyrics, was supposed to be written like for this film, because it perfectly, from the first little ping in the song, if you start that at Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite, that little title card, it ends at the exact moment that like the screen fades with the image that probably a lot of people know of the Star Child. As that fades, the song like fades, and it's like it's the perfect length. So whether or not that's true, who knows? But you can find somebody that's synchronized it, and it is fantastic. It is really, really cool piece of I don't know, conspiracy theory, like cinema history, you know, kind of thing. So
I could fact check that. We both experienced that in college together. I do remember you showing that to me.
Yep. Oh, that is the case. Yep. Yep. Seems that tracks. Yeah, it was one of those things that I found because it was like combining two of my favorite things, just like film and then Pink Floyd. So yeah.
It's also two of my favorite things, which is film and conspiracy theories. So
yeah.
Nice.
Oh, it's the
There we
trifecta,
go. Excellent. The truth is out there.
I just
Well,
think they're fascinating, especially the ones that actually like gain traction.
Mhm. Oh
Yep.
yeah, like the number of people that believe it or support it or join together and provide evidence to it. And oh yeah, I love falling down the rabbit hole on some of that stuff. It's great.
Marianne has never seen The Rock, and I told her, I'm like, one of my favorite things, like I've not viewed the film since I've heard this and read like and went down like deep down like the Reddit rabbit hole. But the theory is that like Sean Connery's character in The Rock is supposed to be James Bond. Like
Oh, I've heard
people,
that.
there's
Yeah.
lots of compelling evidence that like where like the timeline of like Bond, like specifically the Connery movies, where like he kind of drops off the face of the earth, and it's like the implication is that he was in prison, and like some of the line, anyway, you could go down that rabbit hole. So I'm now when we watch this film, I'm going to be like kind of reading it from that
Yeah.
angle and see how it kind of like do I agree or not agree, because I haven't seen that in forever. So
Oh man, I wouldn't put it past Michael Bay to do that just for shits and grins, man. Like
my gut with like nothing more than just viewing like or reading people's sort of like evidence is that I think it's just one of those things that's just kind of fun to imagine. I don't know how intentional, but we'll see. Like the viewing will be where I kind of finally come down on if I think like yes this is or is not. But be a clever way to get around licensing snafus, just don't say the character name but have everything else there, right?
this is John Mason.
Yeah,
This is not James Bond. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so cool. Well, let's transition over to our game board here really quickly, and let's draw a side quest, shall we? All right, let us draw. It is another Dreamcast. So Dreamcast for our audience members is where we will recast a character in a film with a different actor. So this may take us a few minutes, so we can cut around this, like if we have to kind of brainstorm. Actually, I have one. Here we go. I've got one. I'm also going to use a bit of like film history to kind of help guide this, but I don't know if either of you have seen Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's this big meta movie. It was hated. People hated it when it came out, and I actually regard it as, I think it's quite clever and a lot of fun. I don't know.
Is it kind of like the like epic movie, scary movie like franchise?
No, I mean it is in that like it leans into, so it's a metatextual film where like the premise is that a young child who's a big fan of like Arnold Schwarzenegger's work is like transported into like the movies, and he's like trying to convince him that like he's a fictional character, right? He's like, dude, like you're a fictional character. And there's a sequence where and it plays up all the tropes, of course, and like the all the cliches and things. I love that movie. But anyway, so there's a sequence where they're in Blockbuster and the kid's like, I'm gonna prove to you that you're not like a real person, that you're like, this is an actor and a character. And he goes over to the shelf and he pulls off Terminator 2, like off the video shelf, I think, or maybe it's a poster, and it's Sylvester Stallone instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he's like, what the fuck, man? Like, no, he's like, this is not Sylvester Stallone. So I would like to take a moment to imagine an alternate universe where you take the Terminator and you go from Arnold Schwarzenegger to Sylvester Stallone.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. Some of those classic lines from like T2 where he's just like
Hasta la vista, baby.
I know, yeah.
Sorry,
Oh, yes.
Sylvester Stallone. I promise I'm not making fun of you.
That's a really good one.
Oh, that is good.
I'll be back, I'll be back. Let me ask you this, like, so physique wise, like I think like he's got the physique, right? Like especially like peak Stallone. Like if you Google like an image of him in like Rocky 3, for example, Rocky 3 Stallone, like he is shredded. Like I think like that Stallone could easily have played like a killer cyborg, right?
Yeah.
And in my mind, so like for my money, I think Stallone would be way more believable, and like I would buy this recasting as like the evil Terminator that doesn't talk a lot and is sort of
Yeah.
like more of like a physical, like, you know, like unstoppable like presence that it's just relentless, right? Like I think that would be very interesting. Now, where I don't know how I feel it would work would actually be T2, like where he is,
Yeah.
you know, heroic, and he has to have this sort of like, I think Schwarzenegger does such a good job like walking that balance of like he's still a machine, right? He doesn't feel things, but like as an audience member, like you almost like want to think that he feels things by how he interacts with John. I don't know if Stallone could have done that, but what do you guys think like about that casting choice?
I mean, I literally just Googled Sylvester Stallone peak to make sure I knew exactly the physique that he had in his peak. And I would have to agree.
Yes, I mean like
Visual check mark, yes.
I mean, I think it would just be a different spin. I feel like it's because we're so used to Arnold Schwarzenegger as Terminator, like that's why it would be hard to kind of imagine him, but I also would see him making the role completely his own if he had started out in it. And I think we'd be laughing at the idea of having Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movies in that alternate universe.
Could be. Yeah. It's an interesting question. Like I think like it's hard for me to imagine like Stallone again, like where he, like it's a lot more dialogue heavy in Terminator 2, like being able to
Yeah.
pull that off, like and not come across as like funny or like unbelievable. One where he's
Yeah.
just like, you know, says like short set like fuck you asshole, right? Is like the mostly like stuff like that where like it's very short, quick, blank. But you could be right. I mean, like listen, like I'm sure like Arnold Schwarzenegger, had he not been like a very famous bodybuilder, probably would not have been wanted for that role at all. People would have been like this, you know, Austrian, like nobody like that. Like, as far as like actors are concerned, like why do you want to put him in this movie, right? And of course, like I mean, like the history kind of speaks for itself, or like where he went from there. Like that, I mean, he was already pretty famous, but it catapulted him. So
I feel like the fact that Stallone has done so, I guess, I mean, he's so stoic in all of the Rambo movies. I feel like might be, it's arguable that maybe he could pull off just the very dead-faced, you know, very straightforward robotic sort of acting that you're looking for if you wanted to. I do agree that when it comes to articulating some of the lines, especially in the sequel, that may be a little bit more difficult, but I don't know. I would be interested to see him try it. Now that you say it, the more that we talk about it, the more that I think I might be able to picture it. I don't know if it would be the same result. I definitely don't think the relationship that the Terminator and young John Connor have in the second one would have been the same, but I think that it would have been an interesting take to have seen it tried.
And you know, to be clear, I'm not saying he doesn't have chops. So you bring up Rambo, which I'm glad you did. I would argue like the original, like so First Blood, like is an excellent film. Like not just a good movie, that's an excellent film. As like a standalone movie. Like the sequels are like what people tend to imagine, like big action sequences, M60s under both arms, like kind of just that first film is a character movie, like about a guy who's got post-traumatic stress from Vietnam and is being crapped on by, you know, a brutal sheriff, like who doesn't like him because he perceives him to be like trash basically. And it's about somebody that has, you know, a psychological break as a result of like kind of the combination of those two things, like police brutality and sort of post-traumatic stress. I think that, I mean, if you've never seen that, May, I highly like just the first one is fantastic. It is really, really a great film. But so I think like looking at something like that, like there's sequences in that are very moving, like as far as like acting chops, like so I wanted to just clarify and say like I think he has it. I just
We're not
that
here to
role,
slander Sylvester Stallone.
yeah, would
No,
never.
no.
I just don't know. Like it's that because it's a very tight rope in two particular, like where he's got to be believably likable, but still not like emote like. And
Mhm.
it's one of the brilliant things that movie does. I'm trying to think like what else like to like makes up the Terminator films where that like recasting would sort of have an effect. Yeah. No, I mean that's about it really. I think he's got the action chops. It would be more of the kind of the interactions with the other characters.
I can follow that.
I just want them to do a reboot with Sylvester Stallone now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if the
Nice.
podcast ever gets massive, if we ever have celebrity guests, like I feel like he owes it to us to do some readings, you know what I mean? We got to feed him some lines and just see how it goes.
So we
Exactly.
kind of bashed your acting, so we'd really like you to come show us
We
that you
did. I
know that
clarified.
we're-
I love Sylvester Stallone. Like I do. Again, the original Rocky, fantastic. I think that's another great character film. Like I think he gets a bad rap
Oh,
because he
yeah.
does a lot of
Yeah.
like, you know, action-y type stuff. Like yeah, cool. All
I mean,
right.
I would, and for my 2 cents on loving Stallone, like I will still go out of my way to watch some of that stuff, like even like the goofier stuff. So like Demolition Man, like I will 100%. If there's a Stallone flick or a Schwarzenegger flick on, there is no question that I would still enjoy that stuff. So
Yeah, over the
at
top.
least,
Come on, man. Like
oh yeah, like Wesley Snipes and oh man, that movie's great. Taco Bell is like the only restaurant that still survives in the future. I mean,
Demolition
I can follow the logic of this film. It's almost like it was prescient somehow, but nah.
yeah. No, I agree. Like he's from an era but you know, I like that he did some other kind of like more like nuanced character. It's nice to see action stars that can pull that off as well, you know. And a lot of people forget like he wrote like Rocky's like his script. That's a fantastic you know, again, like amazing movie. The sequels, like different story, like they kind of vary in quality and they are much more like kind of formulaic and like fun. But that original like film is like easily you can argue it's in the top 100 greatest movies of all time. Like so.
Yeah.
Let us transition to our main topic, our main quest. So we are going to be talking about All About Eve and Mean Girls, which is our very first versus mode. So I will give some background here on these two films. All About Eve was released in 1950 and was adapted from a short story which appeared in Cosmopolitan magazine in 1946 called The Wisdom of Eve by Mary Orr. It was adapted into a screenplay and directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz. I hope I'm saying that name right. And contrastly, we have Mean Girls, 2004 release with a screenplay by Tina Fey, directed by Mark Waters, and was based on Queen Bees and Wannabes, which brings me to May's board. Oh, I just spoiled your. I just spoiled your thing. Oh man, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
I had
You
a
did your
momentary lapse.
research, so
I did. Okay, well,
We can make a little Mark go back, edit that out, and I'll just pretend I didn't hear that.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm just like I told you I have vacation brain already.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Well, the trivia that I was going to piggyback off of yours was so true or false, Queen Bees and Wannabes is a work of nonfiction. So the source material for Mean Girls. That's my trivia.
I looked this up to write my trivia question, so I already know the answer. So Will.
That's a work of nonfiction. Let's say false.
So you think it's a work of fiction? It is actually a work of nonfiction. It is a self-help book that was written to help parents understand the complex world of navigating high school cliques and bullies and things of that nature. So
I kind of want to read it because like I've seen a lot of nightmarish parenting books from like the 80s and 90s, and
I can imagine.
I like Mean Girls. I think it does like have like it deals with that issue well. So I feel like it probably is a decent guidebook, but I'm wary just because of the era it was made in.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think even modern, you could probably find some nightmarish like things like released like in modern times, you know, like it is interesting to see. It's almost like, you know, fad diets, like in a way, with like the advice that young people or parents are given, like on like this is how you, and it like the truth is so much more complicated usually than like what they boil it down to, right? Like
Right.
in those kind of books. Well, if you do, please report back because I would be curious to hear what you uncover.
We'll do a Screen Quest reading series.
Yeah.
Nice.
So both adaptations, very different adaptations, obviously, but that's kind of where like the similarities start with both of these. So what I wanted to talk about to kind of kick us off is I think structurally these movies have a lot of similarities, right? Like kind of like the crux of the plot, specifically climbing the social ladder and two women being kind of at the center of a power struggle. So that's where I wanted to kind of kick us off at like similarities that you both may have noticed between the films, specifically around those things. So yeah.
I'm trying to think of how to word this, but it's interesting how both Margot and Regina kind of take like the newer / younger women under their wing. And it does feel like Margot has some reservations, but she's somewhat sincere in taking Eve in initially. Whereas with Regina, it feels very two-faced the entire time.
Yes.
So that's kind of like the biggest difference I noticed. I do think that you're supposed to, because of the point of view, especially, you're supposed to sympathize with Margot and All About Eve, whereas you're supposed to sympathize more with Katie in Mean Girls, which is, you know, kind of the flipped position if we're like directly comparing these.
Yes, that is an excellent observation. The perspectives and sympathies sort of being like reversed from film to film. Obviously, I think like ageism is something that doesn't really factor into Mean Girls because it's set in high school, right? Like where everybody is probably perceives themselves as invincible and you know like they're never going to get older. Whereas like it is very much a central theme in All About Eve, and I think plays a bigger role in those dynamics and sort of where the beef lies, so to speak. One thing that is I think not central but like present in both films is the like affections and attention of men and how that kind of factors into the rivalry, I guess, like is the best word I can come up with off the top of my head between each of the pairings there and the films. I think they have very different conclusions. Do you guys do you see like Mean Girls as sort of a more natural evolution where in other words, like I think like All About Eve kind of falls back on that like normal like or heteronormal like this is like the logical conclusion to this, like at least for Margot, whereas like Mean Girls seems to be a little bit more like liberate, like that plot device kind of falls off by the end, right? Like it's not as central. So what did you guys make of that? Is that just time and evolution, social evolution unfolding on the silver screen, or do you think there's something more to it than that?
I mean, I think their youth in Mean Girls has a lot to do with that difference, right? It's they're 16-year-olds in high school. I guess at one point it would have been normal for them to get like, married the next summer, but it's not really the norm anymore, right?
Yeah, I would argue a lot of those high school movies though do very much like have that sort of like romantic like ending where like there is like a coupling, right? You think like about like your American Pies, for example, or something like that, where they're like, I guess it depends on the character, but a lot of times there is sort of that like, yeah, they're not married or anything, but like they sort of end up together, and it becomes like the like I guess the thing that the audience can latch onto for like this is how we know things are resolved, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Katie and Aaron are together at the end, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you are correct, but I feel like it's one of those things like I don't know, for my money, like and we'll get to this in a second because I have like a whole like list of kind of thematic things around like balance and like sort of like homeostasis and all this stuff, but like I think that takes a back seat to like where like I think Mean Girl seems to be more interested in like the natural order of things and sort of like restoring balance like within the high school at the end, right? Like
Right.
and how truth and rumors kind of factor into that. So yeah, I think it's a good point. It's a fair point that they do end up. Interesting that it's Katie and Aaron and not Regina and Aaron, because I think you could sort of you know, argue that like you may have been able to sort of show like character growth a bit more. Like Regina's obviously unfaithful, right, to Aaron, whereas I think correct me if I'm wrong, like, so I know like when Katie and Aaron are kind of brought together, like that doesn't play out, and then there's not really much like interaction after that where it's like like there's a portrayal of like him being unfaithful, right? Or do I have that backwards? Am I misremembering this?
So when Aaron is still dating Regina, I know like Katie like makes out with him and he does like pull back and is like, yeah, I can't do this. And that's when
Right.
she's like, oh, well, Regina's cheating on you anyway. I don't think Aaron ever cheats on Katie. I think that like he knows she's interested and then Regina comes and like tries to like, basically takes it back. And
Yeah.
so he forgets her.
Yes. Yeah, you're correct. It's weird because this feels like navigating high school rumors, like just talking about this movie a little bit. Yeah, and interesting that there's like a similar scene in All About Eve, right, with Bill and Eve, and Bill's Margot's fella, sort of. And there's that a similar sort of rejection that happens early on, way more nefarious, I think, like on the part of Eve versus like Katie, but a pretty similar scene nonetheless.
Both takes place on a bed. Just saying.
Yeah, that would have been quite scandalous for the 1950s for All About Eve.
I guess that's why it was like a theater set for where that scene took place versus
I imagine
like,
that was probably a cheeky way. Yeah, I hadn't considered
That's
that.
a good point.
Yeah,
because we do see the beds that are separated later for the oh geez, names.
Richards? Richards,
yes, exactly. Yeah, for when they get called up in the middle of the night. And you see that they're both sleeping in separate beds, and I had forgotten that this at the time frame for when this film came out was sort of what I guess because of the Hays Code about what was okay and what was not okay to show.
Yep. In a lot of ways, I think this film is able to navigate, like the themes feel very mature in this movie. Like I think it always blows my mind. Like I like in my head, like I had it that this came out in like the mid to late 50s, which it wouldn't seem like it would make that much of a difference, but there's quite a stark contrast from like 1950 and then like 59 for the type of movies that were coming out and sort of how things were starting to relax a bit. So let's talk about all about Eve specifically here, I guess, like, and then we'll pivot to Mean Girls, and then I want to talk about more of the interplay between the two of them. But first viewing for both of you. I know May, you said this was your first time seeing it. Was this your first time seeing this as well? Will, All About Eve?
So I saw this back in film class back in college. Yeah. And truthfully, I can't remember which film class it was, but I do remember that it was I feel like it had to do a lot with, well, I guess it was power dynamics was what we were talking about. But yeah, I can't remember if this was more of like a world cinema class or more of a sex and cinema style. But I guess you were in sex and cinema with me, so I can't speak to that. No, that was probably not it.
Yeah,
it's probably film noir. No. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's been a while, but it was one of I remembered most of what took place in it, but I had forgotten some of the sort of the pieces in the middle connecting from the beginning and the end, and also forgotten that Marilyn Monroe shows up in this film, because I have actually not seen any Marilyn Monroe films where she is the star, but I remember that being a point that was made after rewatching it, and it was like, oh yeah, I do remember that sort of being name dropped when we saw this way back when. So yeah, but it was cool to see that her, and then also I haven't really seen anything else with Betty Davis either, and so I feel like that's sort of a good reference point to go back and start watching more old classic cinema.
If you need a recommendation for Marilyn Monroe films, look no further than Some Like It Hot, which I think it after Doctor Strangelove is my second favorite like comedy of all time. And Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis in drag for the entire movie, because they're on the run from the mob, and they both fall in love with Marilyn Monroe, who thinks that they are other women musicians, and it is just hilarious and timeless. That movie is great. So here's my recommendation for you.
Nice.
For a Marilyn Monroe flick. Like, it's a good place to start for sure. What did you make of this, May? Like, so this was your first time, correct? Like,
It was,
you
yes.
enjoy it?
I enjoyed it a lot. I was a bit of a theater kid in college, and I was just like, you know what? Some of this dialogue is definitely kind of like over the top. It's all supposed to be like full of like these witty zingers, and everything is kind of a metaphor for the stage. But I'd say at least 50% of that was realistic for theater people.
Cutthroat.
Yes.
So like that was enjoyable. I love Margot's character because I feel like it's rare in this time period. Again, maybe it's different because it's early 1950s, but to see a like confident and, somewhat problematic woman, and like see her like navigate, a very interesting social issue. She does end up married at the end, and that's kind of like the, what wraps it all up in a bow. And I don't love that necessarily for how that kind of like takes care of everything. But yeah, I love what they did with her character. She's like someone I would not have expected to see in the 1950s in a major film. So that kind of blew me away. And I'll talk about this more when we actually like say which film was our favorite. But I liked that there were discussions of kind of like the double-edged sword of being a famous or public woman, that didn't feel like ham-fisted or like, just kind of like shoved in there because they had to talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, you bring up a good point. I think that may have been more of a product at the time, like where Margot ends up. Like, it does, like, that's one of the few things that I wrote down, like, that feels like most of this movie's timeless to me, but like that right there, sort of the resolution of that, where I was just like, this is kind of disappointing, because like I get that this is probably where she needed to end up, especially to show kind of the moral like high ground, like contrasting with Eve. But you were right. Like, I mean, the portrayals like up to that point for most of the movie are, I mean, it's touching. Like, the older I get, I think the more I can really start to sympathize with that feeling of like getting older. And um I mean, I found her performance to be very moving, right? And like human, the things that she sort of struggles with and things that she's feeling, the insecurity, and just having to reconcile what it's like to get older, and to maybe like fall out of the spotlight a little bit as well. Especially in the context of having like this young, like, up and coming like actress nipping at her, heels, like pretends not to be for most of the movie, like, oh, this is just circumstantial. um but yes, no, I agree. A couple little quick pieces of trivia that I thought were interesting on this movie. So her croaky vocal quality in the film is actually, it's kind of a sad thing, like as a result of near free constant screaming matches with her soon to be ex-husband. So she was going through a pretty tumultuous divorce, and it made her voice raspy, and the director thought it was kind of an interesting quality, and was didn't have her try to work around it. But it's kind of sad to like see that on screen, and realize like what it is. But
especially given what she's going through as a character in the film too.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Her co-star Gary Morrell, who played Bill in the film, fell in love in real life. And they were married for 10 years, and I guess she remarked that it's similar to the movie, where she says like, I think he's fallen in love with Margot, like the actress, like not like the real Margot. She remarked that she felt the same thing had happened with the situation, that their characters kind of fell in love, but like not reality. And she had begged Joseph Mankiewicz to do a sequel for years and years, and then I guess bumped into him at a party later and said, Joe, you can forget that sequel. I've played it and it doesn't work. So she wanted to do a sequel about her and and Bill. So very interesting stuff. This was credited as sort of rescuing her career. She had been in some films that didn't do so hot, leading up to this, and said that this like single-handedly was responsible for her kind of rising back up to the top and becoming, a force to be reckoned with again. A lot of people think, the last bit of trivia, because her and Anne Baxter were nominated for Best Actress, a lot of people think that it probably split the vote, so neither of them won, and somebody else went home with the statue at the end of the night. But no way to know that, because it's not like public knowledge like how the votes break out. But that rings probably true to me. Like it seems like something that would probably pretty easily happen. Like if you've got two people that are sort of neck and neck, you could have somebody that doesn't get or is able to win, I guess, because the votes are split so much between the others. So
yeah.
Well, if there's anything that I learned from Mean Girls, it's that you can always take the reward at the end and divide it up.
Yeah,
so everybody can get a piece of that
statuette.
statue. Just snap it, compliment each person, and just divvy it out. Everybody's a winner. Everyone is beautiful. Everyone is a winner.
That's right. Yeah. I definitely have thoughts on the resolution that I want to talk through with you guys for both of these films, because it's a very different ending from one film to the other. But just before I forget, because I probably will, I did want to give a quick shout out to Thelma Ritter, who played Birdie in this, and who's one of my favorite characters in Rear Window. She's a great character actress who got a lot of Oscar love, like in terms of nominations especially, but she's just wonderful. I forgot that she was in this, and all of the scenes with her, I feel like she almost like stole the show, or at least like she's standing up next to giants, and like she is just as wonderful as anybody else in any of the scenes that she's in. So
she's such a grounding character too. Like you have these people who are speaking in this kind of very like high metaphor, like stage dialect, and then she's just like bullshit.
She's got a very strong, like, what is it, like Brooklyn accent, right?
Yeah.
Which was, I guess, like a sort of a trademark of hers. And then also like her reaction immediately to hearing Eve's story is like that she recognizes it for exactly what it is, which is it's farcical, kind of like at best, and probably a flat out lie, like which is interesting. So that brings me to like my first or I should say like my next prompt for you guys. So truth and rumors and information kind of play a factor in both of these, like how the truth is either obscured or used. So I wanted to talk a bit about like the concept of truth or reality in both of these movies, like and how like truth functions within each of them. So we can start with Mean Girls. Give Mean Girls a little love, and then we'll transition back to All About Eve if you want.
Yeah, there's obviously there's the big reveal of the burn book towards the end, which feels like kind of where all of that comes to a head, like all the secrets and lies and gossip. The idea of like the three-way phone call was very funny to me.
Yes.
Was that actually a thing people would do to each other?
Oh, May, thanks for making me feel very old already. Like All About Eve did it. Yes, it is. It actually is. It was a very common thing. Like if you had the ability to do three-way calling, it was kind of a status symbol, which in the context of this movie, like I'm sure like it's not hard to imagine that that being something that they would forward over, like, hey, like we can do three-way calls, like that, and call waiting were like two phone functions that like were not standard on like phones or phone lines, and were a bit of a status symbol. So but yep, they were definitely done. And you could prank. So to give you a little context, I'm gonna really date myself here, but if you like you could prank people that way or do something like untoward, but it was also a great way, like if you wanted one of your friends to know that somebody thought they were cute or liked them, like if they didn't believe it, you could always like have them like mute their line and then like do a three-way call and like have somebody like talk with somebody about them, not realizing that they were on the phone, and be like, see, she thinks you're cute, right? Like should ask her out.
It's basically the equivalent of the modern like taking screenshots and sending them to people.
Yeah.
Yep, it's true.
Yep. So
Interesting. Okay.
continue. But yeah,
So
sorry, I didn't
yeah.
mean to derail that. But yeah, it was a thing that happens.
Sorry, I went to high school in the 2010s. Spin that up. All right. So yeah, so like there's a lot going on with like, truth depending on who you're talking to, right? Um, and when the burn book comes out, it's suddenly, the audience is everyone and everyone loses their shit. And I think it's very telling the moment in the auditorium when Tina Fey's character is asking, okay, who's been gossiped about? All right, who's spread gossip? And everyone raises their hands for both. Because yeah, that's how high school is, and I think the film does a good job of capturing the feeling like it's the end of the world if there's a rumor going around about you. Because like I know that's how I felt in high school anytime something went around about me or anyone else I knew. And it's really not, but it feels that way because of your age. And I know we'll talk about all about Eve next, but I think that that's another place where like the age of the characters is very different and causes a very different effect with like the weight of the lies and the rumors.
Yeah, I think also like in Mean Girls, like well, actually really in both films, but I mean like rumors are sort of weaponized like a little bit, but like in Mean Girls it's more to like suppress like popularity or like status. And there's sort of I talked a little bit about balance. When the truth is like ultimately revealed, so like what's true, what's false, and to your point, like everybody realizing that it's more of a universal experience than they probably think. That balance is kind of restored, and people have almost like a clear vision of their peers and of each other, like than they do prior to that scene. I think it's very cathartic. Like I love that trust fall scene. It is such a beautiful representation of like, it's silly, right, but it's such a beautiful representation of like everybody bearing their soul a little bit and being vulnerable. And I think like sort of that confession and being truthful is what allows like the clearing of the air, I guess, is what allows that balance to kind of shift back a little bit. And it's a much healthier outcome from that point, in the film. It's a much healthier environment for everybody. And All About Eve, like we can talk about that in a second. It's again a very different thing happens with truth, but well, I'd be interested to hear your take on Mean Girls first, then we can shift to.
Sure. Well, I definitely agree with the weaponization of truth. Everybody has something that they want to share about somebody else in order to shift focus from them and belittle the other person that they're talking about, or sow confusion or manipulate other people to do what they want them to do. So when Regina wants to get back at somebody, she doesn't come at them directly. She always comes up with some sort of lie to, as a smear campaign to get them in trouble. Or she doesn't hurt the person directly that she doesn't like. She'll hurt the person that's adjacent to them. So when she saw that her ex-boyfriend was, dating somebody else, supposedly, then it was the whole, well, I'm just going to call up that other girl's mom and pretend to be from Planned Parenthood and just say that test results came back in and, just torpedo that potential relationship right there. So I think that it's interesting that for a lot of it, it is very manipulative in terms of, hiding your true self behind this facade of this character this persona that you want to make, and then using other people's truths or the truths that you concoct about them in order to, push them down a peg or keep them from being competition in this environment that they're in.
The most interesting thing to me about sort of most of the characters reveal are kind of perceive, I should say, like revealing the truth to be like a scary thing or something that's going to harm them. And then there's that weird anomaly with like the coach and like the students, like, and it's like, it's probably a good thing that this that this came out. Like this is one good thing that came out of that burn book, because like it's probably one of the few truly harmful things that's going on in the school. And I think it was very emblematic of the early 2000s that like it's not as big of it's almost like that rascally coach, they got to chase him out of the school. Like that would be a huge I mean, in reality, like that would be a huge deal, something like that came to light. So
It is
Yeah.
interesting looking back on a lot of the teen comedies that came out around that time frame or even earlier, and some of the stuff that was joked about that it's like by today's standards, you're like, ooh, that has really not aged well, or that is way inappropriate. But back
Yeah,
then it was tolerated
there's a couple
as
word
a joke.
choices that I will not repeat on the podcast that
Yeah.
are things that you would not say.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and really like any context. You know, but yeah, I was like, "Ooh, I'm like, that didn't age well."
No, I do feel like the thing with the coach and also like the drug allegations around Tina Fey's character, I think it serves the purpose of kind of like grounding the kids in the fact that, oh, you know, when you get to an adult, or if these are about adults, there's actual consequences for this, and you need to learn that now.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, because that's what actually is like the come to Jesus moment for Lindsay Lohan's character, right? Is realizing that, oh, my teacher could get in huge trouble for this lie I made up about her. I better actually fess up. It wasn't any of the social stuff and like all of her friends hating her that made her, you know, step up. It was realizing that, oh, this person could actually have their life ruined because of me.
Yeah, I love sort of the running like metaphor of like the animal world. Speaking of balance,
Yeah.
you know, and like homeostasis, like you know, sort of that like I think like it kind of embraces the idea that there is a bit of a sort of like pecking order like in the animal world as like as well, but also like kind of at the same time saying like, hey, like we're not like just, and I think Lindsay Lohan kind of learns that like we're more complicated than that. Like in other words, we can't operate as animals do in the animal world. Like we have to be sort of better than that and rise above that. But I loved that you know, symbolism of whenever she imagines something going down, you know, like tackling and then the ape sounds, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and in the lunchroom and stuff like that just tickle me.
That was funny.
So let's pivot to All About Eve, because I think in a lot of ways, like similarly, like the truth is used as a sort of currency or like weapon, but there's a bit of a different outcome. So I've got thoughts, but I wanted to start with either of you, and I'll kind of lend my take in a second. So same thing, same kind of prompt or question, like, so how did you see the truth and like reality and all that stuff kind of functioning you know, in the film, and what is what's being said, you know, it's very different, I think.
I think the truth is sort of a question that Margot's asking herself through a lot of the film, because she struggles with trying to identify who she is versus the status symbol, the persona that she is in the theater industry. And she's trying to separate out, is this really who I am? Is this who other people see me as? Or am I just, you know, is this just my life in the theater? Is theater life, or should I be able to step back from that? And what would I be if I did? So you know, when she's talking to Bill about that, where she questions whether he really knows who she is or whether he's just around because of the idea of who she is. Um, Age definitely plays into that for the purpose of the film, in terms of their age difference, and also the unfortunate double standard of that age difference had they been the opposite, if she had been younger than him, and whether that would have not been an issue where it is for her in the film because she's older than he is. And then I think that I think it is also weaponized as well, at least by Eve, because we all come to find out the truth behind her, that she's, you know, blocked out from everyone else in order to work her way to the top. And the only person who, at least that we know, that knows that by the end of it is the schmarmy
Addison
film
DeWitt.
critic. Yeah, Addison
Yep.
DeWitt, who is pretty much the devil for the purpose of this film. So yeah, I would say that in that respect, yeah, it's definitely it's interesting, and it sort of ties into another thing that I'd like to talk about, where it's the use of the mirrors that they have in the film, which can also segue back to Mean Girls, but that's kind of digressing. So I'll turn it over to you.
I do want to hear your mirror take.
Yes, at some point
But
for sure.
yeah, it's interesting because obviously you're like Regina is kind of the main like liar and rumor spreader in Mean Girls. Whereas in All About Eve, like at least with Regina, you know, there's kind of like her fake side and her real side, and she's real at times to the other plastics, and you kind of get a sense of how she really feels, and it's basically that she's a narcissist and she thinks everyone else is like ugly and terrible, right? um Whereas with Eve, I feel like I, even after at the end of the movie, I have no idea what she actually thinks or believes or anything about her, because she doesn't seem to ever kind of like take the mask off with anyone. um at first I thought like maybe with Addison she was being more candid, just because he is a bit of a snake, and you find out that he's actually no, like the king snake later. But um you realize that, oh no, she is being fake with him too, but just in a different way from everyone else. And I feel like that makes her character all the more unsettling, because at least with Regina, it's like, well, the audience kind of knows who she really is, even if none of the characters do. Whereas I still don't know anything about Eve. Ironic for a film called All About Eve.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I think that that was part of what made it a lot more unsettling to me, compared to Mean Girls. I also think that like uh Bill repeatedly says that Margot is just being, you know, paranoid and you know, not seeing the truth or reality, just kind of having like these made up fantasies and paranoias in her head. Um and I think that is interesting because it is somewhat paranoia, but it's also somewhat a product of the lies and kind of the fake world that Eve has built up for herself. Because it becomes clear to me, at least by the end of the film, that Eve basically kind of like falls in love and creates these grand love stories with all of like the men in her life, and then tries her best to make them actually happen. And I think, you know, because she was sending like letters to Bill and Margot found out about that early, like she's never paranoid until she finds out about those letters, and it does seem very much based in truth. But because, you know, it's somewhat excusable, or, you know, could be seen as like plausibly deniable, everyone, you know, sees her as being paranoid, right? So I think that's like adds another layer on to the kind of deceit and lies, is her being seen as paranoid when she's actually just being very perceptive about Eve.
Yeah, I as a side note, it's one of the most satisfying moments, even though he is King Snake, as you say, when Addison says "Nah, Lloyd Richards is not going to like leave, like he cuts right through it, and
Yeah.
it's nice in that moment to see Eve knock down a couple of pegs, because as you've pointed out, like that she's concocted this, like this is like in her mind how this is going to go down and how things are, and it's not at all true. I do think it's interesting that like I feel like, so the character of Margot to me genuinely doesn't seem to know who she is, and like it's a lot of soul searching, whereas like to your point, like we don't know who Eve is. I think Eve knows exactly who she is, and I think that's probably a face that she doesn't show to anybody else, right? Like so that's definitely an interesting sort of contrast between those characters right off the bit that I noticed, where I was like, I do genuinely feel like Margot's been a performer all her life, and maybe like, you know, has sort of like this I don't know, like crisis of identity, right? Like of like which is the real like have I been the real Margot at any point, right? Because it's not just on the stage where she has to give a performance. Like you look at her social events and things like that, like I think a lot of that is definitely people remark on it, right? Like I think like even tell her to like, you know, hey, like it's okay, time out, like let's just hang and enjoy the party, right? um I think as far as like the weaponization or like the currency of truth, like so the characters that are sort of honest or engage in honesty in this movie are definitely the ones that are able to escape, not unscathed perhaps, but like end up at a better place. Whereas like Eve, who kind of doubles down, you know, when she, like I think the scene that really springs to mind is when she confronts Karen in the ladies' room, and that's where like really like full force you like you get a sense of like who she is. Like maybe that's like the closest you get to seeing the mask slip fully off.
Yeah.
You know, it backfires, right? Like so she's somebody that kind of continues in dealing with that, and from that point in the film forward, like all the way through to the conclusion. Things kind of don't end up well for, I mean, Addison, I guess, is the only one you could argue that like is unscathed or like marred by the truth, but also he's somebody who's dealing in that currency, right? Like of knowing the secrets, and he weaponizes it against Eve, and who's to say that like that won't come back to bite him in the ass at some point. I think like that's sort of the moral lesson you're supposed to take from the movie, is that like these all have consequences, right? Secrets have consequences, and lies have consequences. So yeah, let me look through my notes and see so I can stay on track here.
Another interesting thing with Karen is like the lie that she tells about like the car breaking down, and like that whole like trick is about to come back to bite her when she realizes that, oh, she's going to have to screw her friend over because Eve is blackmailing her. And then just magically Margot doesn't want the role anymore, and she's just laughing hysterically at the table.
That outburst of laughter is great.
Yeah, just like Saved by the Bell moment, truly. And I don't know how to feel about that, and kind of like how that, I guess, kind of confuses the overall like moral lens of like the ones who deal in lies tend to pay a price at the end, because she's
she gets let off the hook, I guess, a little bit in that.
I guess not, because then her husband and Margot have a thing. Maybe that's the repercussion.
That's a good point. That's true. That is a great point. So let me ask you about sort of the outcomes and this idea of like a cycle, because I think like I noticed that there's like sort of like this theme of the like this being cyclic a little bit. So like thinking to the end of Mean Girls, you see the junior plastics or whatever they are, like the or the freshman plastics, like kind of acknowledging that like there's always going to be like this new batch, and Eve, you've got the young actress that shows up and is very Eve-esque in the room. So did you guys pick up on that like in both the movies, and how do you feel about that? Is that just cynicism, like, or what?
I think it's just like acknowledging that like there's always going to be power struggles between people and between women, and it's something each generation kind of has to learn / unlearn, for better or for worse.
Yeah, the poster for All About Eve cracked me up, because it says it's all about women, and then there's an ellipses, and they're men. Like, it was such a weird tagline to me. I don't know if you guys saw that, because like it must be a sign of the times or something, but I just thought that was so fucking bizarre. Like because like to some extent, yes, I guess that's a little bit true, but I think like to me, like the reason I found All About Eve fascinating for a movie that came out in the 50s, it is this woman centric. Like, I mean, that is like sort of the focus, which probably would have been a little bit unusual for the time, and certainly like as we talked about at the beginning of the segment, how the women are portrayed seems very ahead of its time. So sorry to digress. That occurred to me, it popped into my brain, and I was like, oh, I gotta tell somebody else this, like especially on the podcast, because it's like, what? So I think Eve has a much darker, more cynical ending, whereas like Mean Girls, although there is sort of the freshman plastics, it does have a air of hope. Do you guys agree? Like, I thought it was a bit more of a hopeful ending.
There was sort of the idea that that they would be able to sort of keep them in check a little bit better, like show them you don't have to be that way, versus letting it get out of control and the imbalance that they had before.
I think there's also hopefulness just in the idea that Katie, like in her kind of final monologue, is like, yeah, I was like the awkward new kid, and then I became a plastic, and I became the most hated girl in school, but now I'm just a normal person and like happy. And it was a weird way to sum it up, but I think it does communicate the idea that a lot of people, as they're coming of age in middle school and high school, go through these phases of being like awkward / bad people, and figuring out what is and isn't okay, and what will and will not get you like actually like good friendships. And I think that was kind of like where the hopefulness came for me, was just that a lot of people go through this, but it's just kind of a coming of age thing, and you'll come out on the other side like feeling like more of a full bodied human.
And the cliques, like, while not entirely dissolved, I feel like some of those walls and like barriers come down a bit, like where you see characters sort of making peace and like kind of intermingling a bit more. Like that chart, that seating chart, I had to hit the pause screen, my god, the lunchroom was just, I think, a stroke of brilliance, like in terms of like it just like sort of a visual representation of cliques and how people are categorized in high school. But it rang true in a lot of ways for me, I thought. Like I can recall the different cliques that were in my high school and sort of where they sat. Like I still remember like kind of like the lunchroom and all that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons that I relatively, like, I think like easily like navigated high school was like I didn't really belong to any cliques. Like I was just friends with everybody. Like I like to surf, so I hung out with some of the surfer kids. But I also like loved heavy metal, so like occasionally I'd pop over to the goth circle and bum a cigarette and talk like, you know, some heavy metal, right? Like
It's very
and
on brand for you, Chris.
I just, you know, like I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere in particular, and I certainly didn't want to like brand myself like with one specific identity. So but a lot of my friend circle were the same way, right? Like where they sort of bounced around. So we like escape. I saw a lot of that stuff happen. Like I remember some famous like feuds, you know, between groups. Nothing on par with like the Capulets and the Montagues, you know, mind you, but like they certainly thought it was at the time. But so it was nice to be a little bit of a silent observer, I'm not gonna lie. But yes, that visual representation in the event, like with the tables, like was a nice little stroke of genius, I thought.
Pretty on point.
Do you guys remember your high school cliques? Like, was it did this
Oh
ring?
boy.
That's an emphatic yes from May. How about you, Will?
I do. I was sort of the loner, kind of floating in between groups there too, so it wasn't so hard. I was definitely more in a group of nerdy kids at the time, which I was perfectly okay with. That was sort of the safe zone. I've never seen. I always watch all these like, I don't know, these teen movies, and I see like a lot of the bullying or like the ridiculous sort of awkward cafeteria scenes where everybody turns and looks
Yeah,
at one person. And I always wonder like if that actually happens in real life or if that is just over dramatization for the sake of the film, because I feel like that happens a lot for the sense of narrative in these films that we
sure.
watch. But you know, I always think about like my own experiences in high school and I think, man, you know, this is really, I'm glad mine was at least toned down because I feel like it was never nearly this over the top. So I don't know if you guys experienced anything similar, but
Fights were the only time that got that, like things that got that kind of attention in high school. Like other than
yeah.
that, like if people were just having words or getting snippy, like nobody would have thought twice. But like if there was a fight breaking out, like, oh yeah, we got physical, which happened a decent amount in my school.
Oh God.
Yeah.
No burn book came out and everybody and like order just devolved into absolute anarchy and you didn't have to call and say, guys, I'm scared. I don't know what's going on right now.
No burn books. Yeah, there was like rumors occasionally that would fly around and stuff. I feel like the rumors that I remember most are actually ones centered around teachers more than other students, but maybe that's just, you know, I don't know like why that is, but like I'm sure there were rumors about students that bounced around. But yeah, let's now talk about our judging criteria. So I want to hear what your individual criteria was, like, so we'll go one at a time and then we'll vote at the end. So just tell me what your criteria was to start. May, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I have kind of an overall enjoyment criteria as number one. Just like how was the vibe? How did I feel watching the film? Number two, I think would be cinematography, because that's always a big thing for me. It's kind of like how they set up the scenes with the shots. Like, do they use any cool tricks or special effects? Three would just be like the acting and casting. Four, I would say would be writing, and five is like social commentary for me. So I have 5 points.
Very cool. I had similar stuff. So I have like, how is it aged? performances, so like acting performances, writing, and then general craftsmanship is what I put. So like which would include like cinematography or sort of like narrative structure. I kind of lumped all that together in one. So that's when I have very similar criteria. How about you, Will?
Truthfully, I have nothing else to add because everything that you guys covered is pretty much spot on with what I would be looking for in a film, especially if it's coming down to the writing and the cultural relevance. So I wish I could throw in something else, and not to make it sound like I am copying my classmate, but I think that is good where we're at.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I think it speaks volumes that like, May and I had almost identical sort of like criteria, right? It's a good kind of place to judge a film. I think it encompasses most of what you'd be wanting. So do you want to talk about each of the films and how they performed on your criteria list, or do you want to just do a straight vote? How would you guys want to do that?
I'm down to talk through them.
Yeah,
Sure.
who wants to go first? I don't mind going
I
first.
guess I have volunteered myself.
Yes,
so.
go for it. Boom.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go down my list. For overall feel, as much as I enjoyed All About Eve, I did get like, because it is a somewhat darker and more serious film, it was less just like enjoyable to watch. I think this is a hard criteria to compare them for, just because this is more of a drama and Mean Girls is more of a comedy. But it was a lot more fun to watch Mean Girls. So Mean Girls gets the point for number one. Number two, I'm actually forgetting the order I said these in now, but
okay.
I'm going to go straight to like acting and casting. I mean, casting for both of them was fantastic. I do think that the acting was much stronger for All About Eve, in part because of all of the zingers they had to deliver and make it seem like natural and roll off the tongue, as well as I think the facial acting, specifically with the actress that played Eve, and how quickly she goes from seeming very nice and oblivious to spawn of Satan in just like a look. So that's the point to All About Eve for the acting. And then writing, I would also have to give to All About Eve, with all the zingers it has. I think Mean Girls definitely captures, in a way I haven't seen in a lot of other films, the kind of like double speak a lot of girls do when they are being like, catty and bullying, like the pointing something out and complimenting it specifically because you think it's ugly, for instance.
Yes.
And that kind of stuff. Like, it does a really good job capturing that, but I just think overall All About Eve had stronger writing for its lines, and I do prefer the kind of unsettling ending of All About Eve as well. I feel like things were maybe a bit too neatly wrapped up in Mean Girls at times. Number four, it's hard to compare the cinematography just because I feel like Mean Girls is very much like in this vein of 2000s movies of having like scenes like you pointed out, Chris, with like the animal sounds and like kind of these like fake imaginary inserts that are commentary on something that just happened in the film. And I don't love that trend personally. I know it's very common in that era, but I will also have to give this point to All About Eve because I thought that the camera shifts in a few scenes were really, they really added a lot to the story in a way that I really wasn't seeing in Mean Girls. For instance, when Eve is telling the group of screenwriters and actors like her backstory for the very first time after Mrs. Richards brings her in, Birdie walks in from the bathroom right before she tells her story and goes to stand behind the rest of the group, and the camera actually shifts, so it is showing everyone in the dressing room besides Eve facing her as an audience, and then Eve facing everyone else, and it's very clear in that moment that this is a performance and it's her debut. And I loved that. And there were more things like that happened. So cinematography goes to All About Eve as well. And then last but not least, social commentary. Mean Girls has a lot more relevant social commentary just because of the time period. But there is a line I wrote down and saved from All About Eve that really struck me. And it's when Margot is lamenting to Karen in the back of the car. I think it's right after it has broken down. And she says, funny business, a woman's career. The things you drop on your way up the ladder so you can move faster. Forget you'll need them again when you get back to being a woman. And I think it's the most like poetic, funny, and yet relatable way I've heard the double standard a lot of professional women face described, because we are expected to drop a lot of the kind of traditional trappings of being, you know, a woman to move up in our careers, but we're still like expected to be like loving wives and homemakers and mothers as much as we're able to, while also balancing these careers. And I think she kind of describes that double-edged sword in a really great way. So I'm going to say it's a draw on social commentary, just because I think All About Eve makes some really good points, but Mean Girls is more relevant. And that, I believe, is a win for All About Eve for me. I think it was 3-1. So yeah, All About Eve wins.
Amazing.
Ding, 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 ding.
So I'll go next. So for how it's aged, I just put the word timeless for All About Eve. Like, yes, I know there are some things, like I'm sure you guys picked up on the all the discussions of like film kind of being the lower art form with like film and theater. That was a big thing, you know, back when like you know, probably especially like the 40s, 50s, and 60s there started to be a shift, like with sort of like the more personal storytelling of like the late 60s to early 80s in film. But like one of my dear friends who's passed away, like taught acting at Juilliard, and he was active. I think I've told you guys about Gene before, but he said that it was very much like if you were a serious actor or serious director, serious writer, you worked in the theater. Like that's what you did. Like television was unspeakable, but film was sort of like, you know, like the next like lower kind of art form. So that aside, I think that like All About Eve is timeless, and Mean Girls I put as aged fairly well. There's some problematic words used and some other things that are of the time, but overall it was aged pretty well. Performances, so I have First Class, and particularly shouted out Sanders, Baxter, Davis, and Ritter. So Saunders is, or Sanders, however you say his name, was the guy that played Addison DeWitt. Thought he was delightfully evil and you know, just great in that movie as well. For Mean Girls, I have they range from okay to great. In particular, I loved McAdams, Poehler, and Kaplan. I thought were all fantastic. And then for writing, I put All About Eve. I have it chock full of wit with a dash of sorrow and many relatable themes. I thought that Mean Girls was cute and clever at times, and I loved in particular the running thing of the animal world, which we've already kind of touched on. And then general craftsmanship, I have First Class for All About Eve. I said this movie flies by and is interesting from the very first scene. Like I just love the setup and the award show at the opening and the sort of narrative from Addison DeWitt. And then for Mean Girls, I have that it's decent. I think in a lot of ways it does stand apart from other high school movies. There's some very, very clever things that are done. And then in other ways, it feels very of the time and like kind of like comfortably in that subgenre of comedy. So I give this also to All About Eve. I did not like score one over the other. I just kind of had general comments for each of those. So All About Eve firmly for me. And Will, your vote still counts despite what people on conspiracy theory radio shows may tell you. Go ahead,
it's
man.
nice to let you know that I've invited a guest to our show today who will also be voting. No, phoning in someone to assist.
Your cat.
Sylvester
I know,
Stallone's
exactly.
like, hey, yo, I watched this film. It's Sylvester Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone. Yeah.
I heard what you were saying about me. Sorry,
I told you I'd be back. You know, so yeah.
Oh God.
Full circle.
Oh
Yes.
my goodness. So yeah, no, all right. So this is gonna sound a lot like what you guys have mentioned, but I'll try to vary it up a little bit more. And I will, for everybody involved, I'll go ahead and say All About Eve as well. Will take this one for me. So there will be no necessary arguing of the verdict there. But I will say, from an enjoyment factor, definitely Mean Girls had it more for me, and I say that because of the fact that that All About Eve is darker. because you're not really sure about the ending. You're like, okay, so there's going to be a lot more of these people that, you know, sort of emblematic of that mirror scene at the end, where it goes from one girl who's trying to, you know, to take this, you know, this symbol of success, and then it just multiplies and you see an infinite number of Eves, quote unquote, symbolized in the infinite mirror shot that we have at the end. So in that respect, it's sort of, I don't want to necessarily compare it to a horror movie, but it's sort of the same thing. Like, okay, so the main cast of characters found resolution, but there's that one person that, oh, you know, something's dangling there for a sequel. And so that was sort of the, you know, it ends on kind of that note where, yeah, things are going to continue or could get worse. And so for me, from the enjoyment factor of Mean Girls having a more optimistic resolution, I feel like that was where the entertainment value for me made more sense to vote that way. Cinematography, going back to the use of mirrors and All About Eve, for me was pretty much one of the reasons why I like the cinematography better in that. I think it's interesting when you juxtapose a lot of characters in mirror shots, or you show mirrors as a way of identifying the duality of a character when they're changing their mind about what their end goal is, or they do something that's out of character, or they are grouped with another character for whatever comparison you want to make. So for instance, Margot, when she's in the dressing room at one point, you see that Eve is in her reflection, as sort of symbolizing that, okay, this is their attachment and Eve's desire to, you know, to go for what Margot has and essentially supplant her later in the film as, you know, the top dog. Or using it as a reflection of self. So when Margot's wondering, you know, later about who she is and what her own personal identity is versus the persona that she's made. And even early in the film too, when she questions her own importance, when she's sort of not really in makeup, but she's looking at the mirror, and then Bill comes in and makes some off the comment remark about what her face looks like. And you know, sort of that whole establishing of, you know, her own insecurity with that and her how she is perceived, I thought was really important. Acting wise, again, All About Eve, just because of the fact that it is I mean, we could say the one-liners that are delivered really well. I know we can keep coming back to that, and it's true. I feel like this age of Hollywood, they were much more concerned about making sure that you had a really tight script and you had a really good cast of characters. And so for me, I have to go with that for the acting. That's not to downplay the actors that we had in Mean Girls, because I love that cast as well. And I think that they were the perfect people for those roles. But I just think comparing the two, I have to go with All About Eve. Writing is kind of the same way. I would say writing's a little bit more of a draw for me. And I say that only because and this is probably just because of the fact that it's been done so much, but I get a little, not necessarily tired of, but there's so much Hollywood film that's about Hollywood or about the theater, that it's sort of like, the people in Hollywood loves films that are about itself and about the process and about its own sort of like self-importance. And so it's like it's nice to see something that's a little bit more relevant that I can empathize with more, in terms of what these characters are going through and their growth and trying to, you know, find themselves and, you know, learn the right and the wrong way to interact in a social environment and the consequences of what that could be. I think is definitely a lot more grounded in my reality than it will ever be for, say, if I tried to be an actor or in theater, and that guaranteed will never happen unless somebody hears this and thinks I sound great. But I will have to say that culture, and that ties into my last point, cultural relevance. I think that it's easier to understand Mean Girls and where that's coming from versus sort of the overall perspective of theater or film. And that's just because of that industry. Whereas we have a high school where I feel like everybody, no matter who you were, can relate at some level to trying to go through that crucible of, you know, breaking down who you were or reinventing yourself, and whether that's in high school or college or both. going through that age and trying to figure out who you are. So on that note, I will leave us with a quote from Mean Girls to even it out a little bit, where Katie made the comment that it was better to be in the plastics hating life than to not be in it at all. And I thought that was an interesting comment that she made about midway through the film, I feel like. And I think that we can all sort of, unfortunately, relate to moments where we might have thought that that was true until we realized that we had other options. So, but in the end, All About Eve, gotta hand it to it. Classic film, still classic, still timeless. So there you go.
Beautifully said, my friend. You made a pretty compelling case, for Mean Girls, despite coming down on All About Eve. I'm glad that we got to this pairing, because I did think it was an interesting, like, sort of pairing, and I love comparing these two films and watching them, not back to back this week, but like within a couple of days of each other was quite a fun experience. Like, because I think they do have a lot of similarities, similar themes, but obviously, like we've established, they come down in completely different places by the end, I think, what they have to say about people, and to your point, relatability for sure. It's no mistake that you got Sunset Boulevard, like 4 or 5 years after this one, is another movie that's about an aging actress. Like, so you are correct that Hollywood loves to sniff its own farts, to use the South Park definition of what smug means. So all right, well, if we've got a couple of minutes, I'd love to do a round of Pitch Storm. May was going to draw. I've never played this, so I'm quite excited to see how this is going to shake out. But May, you want to explain and lead us through this last bit?
Yes. So Pitch Storm is actually a game by the lovely Ben Kepner, and it is a card game of pitching amazing / horrible movie ideas. So I have 2 stacks of cards here. One is plot cards. One is character cards. I will be timing you both. You'll each have a minute to give me a pitch based on a randomly drawn plot and character. I have a pile of notes here that I can choose, that I'll pick from, to give to you for inspirations of things that you should actually incorporate into your pitch instead, because I am the director and I may or may not like what you're pitching me. And then between the two of you, I will vote on the best pitch. I think we can probably do 2 rounds, maybe 3. We'll see how the first one goes. You will each be able to either pick a character out of a short selection or a plot out of a short selection. The other one will be completely random. So, Chris, would you rather have a say over your character or your plot?
So when you say, like,
I'll give you a few options and you'll have to pick one. The other one, it'll be completely random. You will have no choice in the matter.
Oh, a plot. I would rather have a choice over plot.
Okay, cool. So I will draw your cards and let you know your options. Option 1, blank, because we'll fill in the character next. Blank is held hostage at a karaoke bar run by mobsters. Option 1. Option 2, blank fights in bloody gladiator death matches. Option 2. Option 3, blank tries to escape an island full of hungry dinosaurs. Option 4, blank fights to save their family from demonic possession. And option 5, fights to thwart an ancient and unstoppable evil.
Okay.
So to recap, we have a karaoke bar run by mobsters. We have a bloody gladiator death match. We have an island full of hungry dinosaurs. We have a family experiencing demonic possession, and we have a family experiencing an ancient and unstoppable evil.
Cool. Genre? Do I have to stay within a genre, or I can like?
Nope.
Okay, sweet. I am gonna go with the karaoke bar.
Okay.
Monsters.
Karaoke bar monsters. Now it is your turn, Will. Would you like to have a plot or a character?
Oof. Plot, please.
Okay. So, Will, your options are: blank is stranded on a desert island. Blank gets lost in the Amazon jungle. Blank throws a bachelor / bachelorette party that goes horribly wrong.
Nice.
blank races around the world in a hot air balloon, and blank is abducted by aliens. So to recap, we have stranded on a desert island, gets lost in an Amazon jungle, throws a bachelor/bachelorette party that goes wrong, around the world in a hot air balloon, and abducted by aliens. Pick your poison.
I know my gut's like go with the alien thing, but no, I gotta go different. I gotta go against the grain. Try something else. Oh man. Amazon jungle.
Amazon jungle. Okay. So you each have your plots. I'm going to draw. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Cool. Well, I'm going to draw a character card for you. You will have to instantly launch into your pitch, and you'll have a minute for your pitch. Okay. So you'll have no prep time.
Nice. Okay. Let's do it, baby.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Your character is a princess determined to rescue herself who gets lost in the Amazon jungle. Go.
All right. So imagine this. We have a princess. Her name is Christina. She is lost in the Amazon jungle. Her plane crashed. She is trying to not only find her way out of the jungle, but will also through the trials and tribulations that she experiences with the local tribes that are there, perhaps some other nefarious people that are trying to steal precious jewels that are in the area.
Let me stop you right there. I think we need more tornadoes in this movie.
We need more tornado. Okay, so there's also so we're dealing with global warming, right? So there's some weird shifts in the atmosphere. We've got these unexplained like weather phenomena. There's a twister. So think Bill Paxton, Twister. Now, but in the Amazon with Christina, the princess. She's trying to find her way out. What's going to happen? We don't know. Lots of twists and turns, peril, but in the end, she comes out all right, learns a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Mr. Rotondi.
Awesome.
That
also, the
beautiful.
budget for that film is going to be at least, I'm going to need about 100, maybe 100 to 200 if we can work that.
Okay, well, my people will call your people.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, next up we have Chris Waterman. Are you ready, Chris?
I'm ready.
All right, so 1, 2, 3. A group of friends on their last night before they all leave for college are held hostage at a karaoke bar run by mobsters.
All right. So we've got all of your classic high school, like, like friend circle group. This is going to be a classic high school film. We got your geek friend. We got the jock. We've got the goth girl. They're out for a night of karaoke before they leave and suddenly realize that it is a bar run by the mafia. What they didn't know is that the jock is into the mafia deep. He's got debts up to his neck. How did he get that in high school? Well, he's got a bit of a gambling problem. He likes to throw the games at the football, high school football games, and collect on the games.
Oh, man, I just had a crazy thought. Let's set this whole thing on the International Space Station.
Yeah, so how did they get to the space station? Well, the mafia are known engineers of rocket ships. So they throw them into what they think is going to be their holding cell while the mafia decides what to do with them. Boom, the walls collapse. Up they go. They're in a rocket and now they're being held hostage in space. How does it go? Well, let's see. Money doesn't matter in space. So it becomes an all-out bloody warfare as these high school kids try to fight against the mafia to escape the space station.
That is time.
For the record, I would actually watch that film, not to shoot my chances, but I would watch that. A24, right? Is that the next movie they're gonna do?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Waterman. My people will call your people.
Boy, that was a curveball I was not expecting.
In space.
Literally written on the notes card, if you don't believe me. So. That was beautiful. I do feel like, Chris, you had a more interesting combo of cards to work with. So I will have to give it to Chris on that one. Are you guys down for another round?
Yeah, let's do one more, and if we need a tiebreaker, we could do a third. Perfect.
We can do a lightning round at the end if we need it. All right. So once again, would you like to pick your character or your plot?
Oh,
I'm gonna let Will go first since Chris won the last round.
Very good.
Sure. I'll go with plot.
All right. So option 1, blank gets in big trouble with the mafia. Blank receives an unexpected message from God.
Ooh.
Blank is trapped in a dark version of our own reality. Blank discovers a terrible secret about their own family. And blank steals a magical treasure from a dangerous witch. So to recap, we have getting in trouble with the mafia, getting an unexpected message from God, getting trapped in a dark version of our own reality, discovering a terrible secret about their own family, and stealing a magical treasure from a dangerous witch.
Dark version of her own reality.
Alrighty, this is going to be a good one. All right, what about you, Chris?
I'm gonna switch it up this time. I'm gonna go with character and then just see what the fates have in store for the plot.
Oh, this could be interesting. An untrained vigilante is option 1.
Hmm.
Option 2, a mime with magical powers.
Mm-hmm.
Option 3, an aging hippie that longs for the good old days. Option 4, a fraternity on the verge of suspension.
Mm-hmm.
And option 5, a heroic young naval officer. So to recap, we have an untrained vigilante, a mime with magical powers, an aging hippie, a fraternity on the verge of suspension, and a heroic young naval officer.
Gonna go with the mime. Give me
All
Mr.
right.
Mime. Not Mr. Mime the Pokemon, to be clear. Just
Does that mean you have to like just mime your whole answer?
I hope not.
Even better.
That's hard mode.
Okay. Who would like to go first this round?
If you want, I'll go first this time.
Okay. All right. So a mime with magical powers
Mhm.
discovers a map leading to a legendary treasure hoard.
Sweet.
So,
All right.
go.
So this is going to be the newest Marvel superhero. We're going to debut him in the film, not even in the comics. And I'm just going to call him Mr. Mime. His name's Mr. Mime. So Mr. Mime discovers a map that leads to the 7th unknown Infinity Stone. That is the treasure he's going after. He's fighting bad guys. Oh, you thought you were going to punch Mr. Mime? There's a wall in front of him that he just made with his mime. You
know what would be even better? What if the main character's best friend was a mysterious robotic butler?
Well, that's perfect. Ooh. Because the mysterious robotic butler, as it turns out, is Vision. He's not dead. He's just a butler. He's back where he started. He was a butler to Tony Stark, and now he's a butler to Mr. Mime, accompanying him on all of his adventures. Mr. Mime rings the invisible dinner bell. Oh, can I get some food, Mr. Butler? Boom, it's right there in front of him. So yeah, that's the pitch.
Thank you, Mr. Waterman. All right. Will, it is your turn.
Let's do it.
All right. So to remind yourself, your plot is trapped in a dark version of our own reality, and your character is a woman that can speak to ghosts is trapped in a dark version of our own reality. And go.
So imagine a woman, she can speak to ghosts. It's kind of like the Sixth Sense. Not really sure what's going on, why she could speak to them. Her grandfather's there, talks about goblins. Seems like it might be a reference to an older film that we might have watched. Not sure about that either. But then, like trapped in a dark version where suddenly no one can see her, but everyone can see the ghosts. And it's a mystery about what exactly is going on. Why did this change happen? Why is this an alternate reality that she's stuck in? And can these ghosts actually be part of the solution to figuring out how to get her back?
Hold on. I just got an important message from my boss. What if we set this in a future where Dippin' Dots is the world's most valuable resource? We just got to deal with Dippin' Dots, so we have to do this.
Changes in the timeline can have unexpected effects. You know, Demolition Day had, we had Taco Bell was the choice of food in the future. I say Dippin' Dots, replace it with that. Alternate reality, for some reason, this is the currency of the future. And so at the same time, this somehow is the key to unlocking the secret of why these ghosts have somehow become visible, how our protagonist can become visible again, how she can switch to go back to find her way home and solve
that is time. Thank you, Mr.
Probably for the best that it was time, but we're good.
I imagine throwing some Dippin' Dots into your wallet and then trying to buy something later and be like, oh, son of a bitch. Like,
I only had so much time.
See,
It's depreciating too fast.
because you made a Troll 2 reference, I'm just imagining that Dippin' Dots is like the green food equivalent.
Grandpa said,
dude, oh man, I've been jamming on that all
got
week.
some Dippin' Dots. Yep.
Okay, I do actually have to give that one to Will for the Troll 2 reference. Also, just having the worst notes I could give you.
Yeah, I was like, what
And rolling with it. Our lightning round tiebreaker is you are not going to get to choose anything. I'm going to read you a character and a plot, and you just have to go.
word.
Let's do it, nerds.
There will be no notes. I won't interrupt you. So, Ellie has thoughts. Okay.
Ellie's like, no, there will be notes.
All right. So, I'm gonna have Will go first again.
Okay.
That's all right. Okay. So, Will, you are pitching me a genie trapped in a magic lamp fights to save a rare and mysterious animal from poachers.
Okay, so genie trapped in a lamp. I know everybody wants to think Robin Williams, possibly Will Smith. That's not really what this is going to be about. This is going to be more realistic. There's going to be a lot less. We're going to say this is grittier. Trapped in a lamp. You know, he's got a lot of time alone. He's been isolated. He is like the guy trapped on a desert island for a very long time, trying to figure out what has happened to, and I apologize, I forgot the rest of it. There's a dog, there's an animal. What was the thing? There is a dog here. I can hear it, but oh, I think you're on mute, mate.
Thank you. I paused your time also for this. Fights to save a rare and mysterious animal from poachers.
A rare and mysterious animal. Oh, sorry. So the genie who's suddenly been unlocked has decided that, similar to him not wanting to have gone through the same ordeal for so long stuck in this lamp, he's going to go out and be good to something else in the world. And it just happens to be that he has learned about this rare and endangered species of bird that he feels connected to. Will have some symbolism in there, you know, the idea of being able to fly and free yourself, something like that. We'll work it all out later in the script.
That is time. I'm sorry, that was a tough one with the dogs giving their input.
They're like, no, this is terrible.
You summoned that.
Stop it. No.
Oh God. All right, well done. Thank you, Mr. Rotonde. We'll take that under advisement.
It's definitely advisable. It needs a lot of work. We'll get back to you with a better idea later. But yeah, that was fun. Aww. It's good practice. It's good practice for later. Chris, it's all on you, baby. You got this.
We'll see.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. A journalist on the trail of a huge story is kidnapped by terrorists. Go.
Love the kidnapping plots. All right. So, a journalist on the trail of a huge story is kidnapped by terrorists. The twist in this film is that the story was the terrorist. Little do they know, they're giving the journalist exclusive access to their terrorist organization. The journalist, feigning fear, decides to record and write down everything that's happening, which ultimately leads to the downfall and the demise of the terrorists. Now, it wouldn't be a thriller if we didn't have a love interest. So the journalist meets and falls in love with the pizza delivery guy. That's right. The pizza delivery guy there to just serve everybody food falls in love with the journalist, extracts him from the terrorist organization, and the journalist delivers a banger story for which he wins the Pulitzer Prize.
I think the journalist should be played by Sylvester Stallone. And I think that you should have a comic play the pizza delivery guy.
Well, I'm the director. So Will gets kicked out of the room for interrupting me, and by default, the award goes to Chris.
Hey, ding, 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 ding.
No, but that was great, Chris. Great thinking on your feet.
Thank you. That's hard, man. That's really hard.
It is. I'm imagining that as like a Mission Impossible sequel now.
Yeah.
Ooh. Oh, hell yeah.
Yep. You never know when you're going to fall in love. Sometimes it's the pizza delivery man, you know, like happens fast in the movies, baby. That's how
Taylor sold his time.
Oh boy. Well, shall we draw our final card and skedaddle?
Yes.
All right. So we are going to draw our next main quest. We just full kind of disclosure. We discovered on our last episode that the versus mode numbers are visible. They're just hard to see. So we actually flip-flopped a couple. So if I were to draw another one of those, it might be a different number than what's displayed on the screen. So just a full disclosure there. Let me give these main quests a shuffle. May, while I'm shuffling, do you want to abstain if we draw another May card? Do you want to have one more week's worth of break?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I got to sleep in this weekend. So
Ooh, it is. Was the book better? Is the
Noise.
card, and it is number 4, which translates to, drum roll, please. Blade Runner. Blade Runner is going to be our film, and the novel, of course, is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. This is a great card to draw because, again, behind the scenes, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. So we'll have a bit of a break. This gives everybody time to read the book if you want, and time to watch the film as well. This is great. I have seen this movie many times, only read the novel once in college. So I'm looking forward to this one. And this is a Will nomination, by the way, in case I didn't say that. So
Noise.
I'm excited.
Card. Me too. I'm very excited. Have you read the book before, either of you?
No, but Philip K. Dick has been on my list forever, and I feel bad I haven't read him yet.
Very nice. Well, this is a nice, like, shortish one, if I recall. I think it's probably like 150-ish, like page, like maybe even shorter than that. I feel like I read this in like one sitting when I read it. So, and then
it is short. Yep.
Yeah, the film. Has everyone seen the film?
So I've read the book. I've seen the film
a big,
couple of
big
times.
old grin from May that I'm going to translate as no. Well, you're in for
Yeah.
a treat just all around. Like, this is like possibly my favorite sci-fi movie. Like, it's up there, really up there. I think it might be my favorite sci-fi. So yay. All right. Well, I hope you both have a pleasant rest of the weekend and a good couple of weeks while I'm off on vacation. Audience members won't notice a gap because we banked a couple episodes, hence the recording dates are a little out of sync. But by the time I come back, I believe we will be caught up with the rest of the timeline, as it were. So until next time, we love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.